The morning sun peeked over the Blue Ridge Mountains, casting a soft, gold-tinged light onto Asheville's brick streets. Patches of late winter snow still clung stubbornly to sidewalks, but puddles reflected the awakening town like tiny mirrors. The air carried a crisp chill, laced with the faint scent of roasted coffee beans and wood smoke. Street musicians practiced in corners, their notes bouncing off old brick storefronts, and delivery vans hummed past like small, moving cities within the city. Inside a slightly crooked building on Wallace Street, Henry Lawson wrestled with a stack of unsold books. His bookstore, Turn the Page, smelled of paper, lemon polish, and faint vanilla from the candle he had lit last night to mask the mustiness. Henry's hands trembled slightly from caffeine and nerves as he arranged the latest arrivals, muttering under his breath about the cruel realities of small-town retail economics. "It's a cruel world," the narrator quipped, "where paperbacks have feelings, and late winter days are just long enough to notice your failures." Henry adjusted his glasses and sighed. The window rattled as a brisk breeze pushed through the cracked door. Captain Squawk, a parrot the size of a loaf of bread and twice as dramatic, perched on the top shelf, his green and yellow feathers flaring. "Don't quit, don't quit," he squawked, tilting his head as if weighing Henry's soul against the universe. Henry froze mid-sigh, staring at the parrot. "You know, I keep telling myself to take that advice seriously. But it's harder when your entire profit margin is 2 unsold copies of War and Peace and a stack of romance novels nobody reads anymore. And yet," the narrator continued, "there's wisdom in feathers. Especially feathers that scream life lessons at you in monosyllables." Henry attempted to straighten the display of mystery novels. The stack wobbled dangerously and toppled, sending a domino cascade of paperbacks across the wooden floor. Captain Squawk flapped his wings dramatically. "Don't quit, don't quit." And so began the day, the narrator mused, with a man wrestling gravity, commerce, and the unexpected moral guidance of a bird. The door chimed. Ms. Carver, a retired school librarian and local trivia champion, walked in carrying a tote bag overflowing with crossword puzzles. Her glasses slid down her nose as she peered at the mess. "Henry, you've done it again," she said, smiling despite the chaos. Henry bent to pick up the fallen books, muttering, "I call it kinetic merchandising." Captain Squawk bobbed his head approvingly. By mid-morning, a thin drizzle began to fall outside, streaking the windows with a sheen that made the bookstore look like a cozy lens through the world's lens. Henry noticed a couple of passers-by ducking under umbrellas. One jogger, Derek, a college student with headphones blasting indie folk, slipped on the wet pavement, catching himself on a lamppost, which emitted a small, squeaky protest. Henry winced in sympathy. Captain Squawk squawked, "Don't quit. Don't quit." It was the universal motto of the day, the narrator said, whether applied to struggling students, slippery joggers, or mildly panicked bookstore owners. Henry brewed another cup of coffee, the aromatic steam mixing with the candle scent. As he poured, he noticed the reflection of Ellie, a local kindergarten teacher, in the window across the street. She waved and jogged over, coat dripping slightly, hair tousled by the wind. "I heard your motivational parrot this morning," she said, laughing. "I think the whole street heard him." Henry handed her a mug. "Captain Squawk is relentless but effective," he said. She laughed, stirring her coffee. "If only he could teach my class math." The rest of the morning unfolded in a sequence of minor catastrophes, each with comedic undertones. A delivery van backed too close to the curb, knocking over a stack of Henry's carefully arranged local history books. Captain Squawk screeched, "Don't quit," repeatedly, landing on the counter like a feathered referee. Henry tripped over the store's rug, his coffee cup performing a perfect arc before spilling on the rug. He muttered, "That's performance art." Ms. Carver attempted to help, but her elbow nudged a shelf of romance novels, cascading them onto Henry's foot. "Don't quit, don't quit." Captain Squawk's echo made the phrase sound like a war cry. Despite the chaos, Henry found himself smiling, even laughing, at the absurdity of it all. There was a rhythm to the mayhem, like life itself insisting that he keep going, keep trying, and keep caring. By noon, Henry decided to take a short break. He stepped outside, umbrella in hand, the drizzle cooling his flushed face. The streets of Asheville were lively with weekend traffic, cyclists weaving carefully between puddles, and vendors setting up small pop-up stands for handcrafted goods. He walked past Grady's coffee cart, nodding to Grady, who waved while adjusting a floppy hat. "Morning, Henry. How's the book empire?" "As stable as a house of cards in a hurricane," the narrator quipped. "But at least there was caffeine involved." Henry returned to the store to find a small crowd gathered near Captain Squawk's cage. Apparently, the parrot had begun repeating not only, "Don't quit," but also imitating snippets of conversations from customers. The effect was surreal. Don't quit. Don't quit. Kinetic merchandising. Captain Squawk flapped his wings, looking pleased with himself. And here, the narrator said, was the magic. A literal voice of encouragement, repeating the universal truth to anyone who would listen. Throughout the afternoon, Henry navigated a series of community interactions. Mr. Jennings, a retired firefighter, came in to browse mystery novels. He knocked over a display of poetry books and muttered, "Maybe I'm just unlucky." Captain Squawk, now perched on a nearby shelf, intoned solemnly, "Don't quit. Don't quit." Mr. Jennings chuckled, shaking his head. Leela and Max, local high schoolers, stopped in to see the parrot, laughing hysterically at his mimicry. They spilled lemonade on the floor. Henry's heroic mop-up efforts resulted in a spectacular slip that sent him sliding across the bookstore in a near-perfect imitation of a curling stone. Henry tried calling a potential supplier for rare first editions, but the line went to voicemail. Captain Squawk, sensing the tension, repeated, "Don't quit. Don't quit," with extra vigor, as if to compensate for the world's indifference. By late afternoon, the rain had cleared, leaving a soft golden light filtering through the bookstore windows. The street outside glistened, wet bricks reflecting the vibrant colors of Asheville's storefronts. Henry looked around at the chaos. Toppled books, wet rugs, a parrot perched triumphantly above him. And then it hit him, the narrator mused. It wasn't about perfect inventory management, pristine carpets, or even making every customer happy. It was about persistence, about showing up, about letting a ridiculous, opinionated bird remind you that quitting isn't an option, even when life keeps sliding you across puddles. Captain Squawk repeated, "Don't quit. Don't quit," one last time as if punctuating the lesson. Henry smiled, taking a deep breath. He might not have fixed every problem, but he had survived the morning, laughed along the way, and discovered that perhaps success was less about perfection and more about persistence, humor, and a willingness to embrace chaos. The next morning in Asheville dawned crisp and clear, the previous day's drizzle replaced by bright, optimistic sunlight. Patches of melting snow dotted the streets, and puddles reflected the golden glow as cyclists weaved between scattered pedestrians. The smell of fresh coffee and baking bread drifted from Wallace Street, blending with faint hints of pine from nearby planters and the mountains beyond. Inside Turn the Page, Henry Lawson arrived early, carrying a damp umbrella and a slightly squashed breakfast sandwich. Captain Squawk greeted him with an enthusiastic, "Don't quit. Don't quit." The parrot flapped his wings and spun in his cage like a feathered motivational speaker. Henry chuckled, ruffling his hair. All right, I get it. Persistence, focus, survival. The store was already buzzing with early customers. Leela and Max, the teenagers from yesterday, returned, giggling as they tried to sneak Captain Squawk a small cracker. Meanwhile, Ms. Carver was organizing a small, community reading corner, with donated blankets and comfy chairs, trying to entice parents and children to linger. Henry began the morning by checking inventory, noticing that despite the chaos of yesterday, a few rare editions had sold online overnight. Small victories, he muttered, sipping lukewarm coffee. Captain Squawk squawked in agreement, "Don't quit." By mid-morning, a local news crew arrived to do a segment on Asheville's quirky small businesses. The camera operator, James, sat up by the window, while the reporter, Tina, waved at the parrot. "And this," she said, gesturing to Captain Squawk, "is why small business owners never truly work alone." And thus, the narrator quipped, the motivational bird officially became more famous than the bookstore owner. Which, frankly, is exactly how parrot logic works. As filming began, Henry juggled the parrot's antics, customer inquiries, and spilled coffee disasters. Leela and Max attempted to train Captain Squawk to say their own slogans, resulting in a hilarious cacophony. "Don't quit. Don't quit. Pizza rules. Don't quit. Homework sucks." Henry ducked under the cage, narrowly avoiding a flurry of feathers. By noon, Ellie, the kindergarten teacher, returned with a small group of students. She had organized a story hour featuring Captain Squawk as a co-narrator. Henry, attempting to read aloud, was repeatedly interrupted by the parrot's insistence, "Don't quit. Don't quit." The children erupted with laughter each time, echoing the parrot's message. Henry had to admit, the parrot had a perfect sense of timing. Persistence, as it turns out, the narrator mused, can come in wings, beaks, and dramatic squawks. And sometimes, that's all you need to get people to pay attention. Afternoon brought another challenge. A minor plumbing leak in the bathroom, spraying water toward the newly arranged reading corner. Henry rushed to contain the chaos, slipping on a wet rug but managing to prevent a catastrophe. Captain Squawk, standing on a nearby shelf, provided real-time commentary, "Don't quit. Don't quit," punctuated by a small, judgmental head tilt. Even in disasters, the narrator noted, the universe, or a parrot, reminds you to keep going. Sometimes literally. The community began to notice the change. Neighbors popped in to help. Mr. Jennings brought a mop and offered comic commentary about his own failures. Mrs. Callahan delivered hot cocoa in thermoses for everyone. Leela and Max took turns assisting the younger children, ensuring that storytime remained a joyous, if chaotic, affair. By late afternoon, Asheville's streets sparkled under the golden sun. Puddles reflected the quirky buildings, and the air smelled faintly of melting snow, freshly baked bread, and wildflowers from nearby planters. The store had sold a surprising number of books, not through strategy but through sheer charm, humor, and the parrot's relentless motivation. Henry leaned against the counter, exhausted but exhilarated. "I don't know how we did it," he muttered, "but it feels like we actually made a difference today." Captain Squawk flapped, squawked, and ruffled feathers in approval. "Don't quit. Don't quit." And sir, the narrator observed, Henry discovered that success doesn't always arrive in tidy packages. Sometimes it's chaos, laughter, and a well-timed squawk that reminds you life is worth persisting through. As evening approached, neighbors gathered for a small block party outside the store. Lights were strung across the street, children ran about with glow sticks, and the scent of grilled food mingled with melting snow. Henry watched Captain Squawk sit on a makeshift perch, observing the crowd, occasionally squawking reminders, "Don't quit. Don't quit." And in that moment, the narrator said, Henry understood something profound. The parrot's words weren't just for him. They were for the community, for anyone willing to listen. Perseverance is contagious, especially when delivered with wings and a sense of humor. By nightfall, Asheville glowed under soft streetlights reflecting in the remaining puddles. The bookstore, now quiet, held an almost magical warmth. Henry sat in a chair, coffee in hand, and watched Captain Squawk preen. The parrot, as if sensing the moment, squawked once more, "Don't quit." Henry smiled. He had stumbled, slipped, and nearly drowned in a coffee puddle. He had survived chaos, parrot antics, and a minor plumbing disaster. And yet, he had persisted. The bookstore had survived, the community had gathered, and laughter had filled the air. Sometimes, the narrator concluded, life gives you a parrot, a small bookstore, and a messy block party. And sometimes, that's exactly the lesson you need. Don't quit. Keep going, laugh, persist, and eventually, everything finds its rhythm. Henry whispered to Captain Squawk, "We did it, buddy." The parrot tilted his head, gave a final, approving squawk. "Don't quit." The camera pans outward. Asheville streets glisten under twilight, the mountain silhouette against a soft pink sky, the bookstore window glowing like a beacon of persistence, humor, and community.
Like and subscribe if you want daily dose of happiness and motivation.